All set. Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody to yet another virtual meeting of Heritage Oakville. As you know, I spent August getting new and improved eyes installed, but what they don't do is do the short range stuff. So I will have to be putting on my cheap Shoppers Drug Mart cheetahs for the time being, and maybe peering a little bit more than usual at the screen. So I hope you'll put up with that. We've got 4 registered delegations today. And as you know, you've got to register by noon the day before. So that's the number of delegations. IT staff will, as usual, control the comings and goings for that. You all know the drill. You stay muted during the course of the meeting. And if you wish to speak, you sort of wave your hand. I know some of you use the electronic hand, and sometimes I see that, but it doesn't do any harm to sort of jump up and down as well, just to make sure that I'm seeing you. So I'll remind everybody again that we are an advisory committee, and that any advice we choose to give today will go to the Planning and Development Council for its meeting on October the 4th at 6:30. And I'd remind any members of the public who are listening that if they wish to delegate for that meeting, they need to do so by noon on the day before. Anybody who's watching who wants to get the agenda and other materials that we're working from can go to oakville.ca, and under Town Hall Agendas and Minutes, they will find the agenda for today's meeting. So I think that's the sort of start. Do we have any regrets, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, there are no regrets, but I have not heard from Kerry Colburn.
And I'm not really surprised. I mean, Kerry, I would have been astonished to see her here this morning. Yes, I'm not surprised she's not here. If she appears later, then we can have a wee chat with her. Okay, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any of the matters on the agenda today? I'm still not seeing Daniela, and I'm not hearing Daniela, but we will assume that she's not got any pecuniary interest to declare. So seeing none, we'll move on. The next item is the confirmation of the minutes of the agenda of the last meeting. These have been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions? Can somebody give me a motion, please, to approve those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Gittings. As you know the drill, if anyone's opposed to that, indicate now. No one's opposed to that. And I would like to ask something. Diane, if I could talk to you for just a second. Okay, Diane, 2 things. First of all, retiring. I mean, this is astonishing. I mean, I've been in the pension business all my life, and we usually retire people when they get old, like me. What the heck are you doing retiring? And going out to Halifax, well, that's not a bad choice. But we're really sorry to lose you. And we really will miss you. You've been a great transition between the policy and the planning, and the heritage and planning. And that has been greatly appreciated by all of us. We'll miss you. But the reason I wanted to talk to you was, Rod, I noticed that we passed on our conservation district work plan to council. I just wanted, if you could just tell us that all went through. This project's on the go, and any other bits of information you would like to share with us about that?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It went to council, to Planning and Development Council a couple of weeks ago, and the staff report, at the request of the Heritage Oakville, reviewed the kind of our concerns with moving forward with an ICB. The main one being that it can be appealed to the Ontario Lands Tribunal. But there was a concern too that we had, that it would be imposing like rather restrictive interim control measures during the HCD review, and we didn't know if that would foster the right type of collaborative community engagement that we want to get through having this review. So council agreed with staff's position, and it moved on.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. So it is a project. It's something for Sue to do now that she doesn't have that habit to worry about. Councillor Duddick, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Having met with legal, with myself, Councillor Giddings, and staff. The other aspect that was important was our legal counsel basically advised using an interim control bylaw is used for something new, not something that's established, and you're trying to impose restrictions on it. So that was an important factor. So I was quite comfortable that it was appropriate.
Okay, good. And it would have shut them out from the Heritage Grants program for a couple of years too. So it might have been good news for everybody else, but certainly not good news for the folks who are trying to maintain the properties in that district. Okay, so that's good. So we've approved the minutes. We'll move on to the next item. And we have discussion items today, and it seems to be Cabana Day. But anyway, discussion item 4.1 is a heritage permit application for 69 Dunn. And I think that's Carolyn.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're right. This is our Cabana Day. So we'll start with the first item. We'll just wait for the presentation to come up for 69 Dunn Street. So 69 Dunn Street is located in the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. This is what the property looks like from the front along Dunn Street. If you go to the next slide, you can see it is an L-shaped property. So it's unique in that the house faces onto Dunn Street, but the driveway faces onto William Street. And the area at the back of the property, which is adjacent to the Robinson Street properties, is where we're looking at today. Next slide, please. So again, it's designated as part of the Heritage District. It contains the 19th century house on Dunn Street. And in the rear yard, there are currently 2 contemporary carports that were built in recent years. And the proposal today is to remove these carports and to construct a new detached single car garage and an accessory building in around the same location as the existing carports. This type of work requires 3 minor variances, and these were approved by the Committee of Adjustment. The first is for the width of the driveway, which is really an existing condition at the back of the property. If you can see in the images, which I'll show, it's quite wide at the back to allow for turnaround space for the cars. The second is the height of the buildings. The applicants are proposing 4.4 meters in height, whereas the bylaw only permits a maximum of 4 meters. And third is a lot coverage of 27.1%, whereas the max is 25%. Next slide, please. So here's an image of the back of the property. You can see the large driveway back there in one of the carports. Next slide. Here's an image of the carports with the house and behind them, which faces onto Dunn Street. Next slide. And here is a view of the carports from the existing house. The owners are also proposing to put in a pool and some landscaping. Because those details weren't all finalized yet, they are proposing to come back for another heritage permit to provide all the materials and details for that landscaping portion. So today we're just looking at the 2 new buildings. Next slide. And this is just an image of the back of the house. No changes proposed here, but it is good to see this image to show the materials that are on the existing house. You can see wood shingles on one portion of the house and wood siding, as the owners have been proposing to use similar materials as what's existing on the house. Next slide, please. And just a view from William Street. So this is the driveway that has access out to William Street, with the carports beyond that area. Next slide. And this is a view from Dunn Street. You can see the house in the middle there, and all the works will be done towards the back of the property. So quite difficult to actually see the existing carports and the new proposed buildings as well. Next slide. Here is a site plan of the property. As you can see, there's the 2 new buildings in a darker shade on the left-hand side. You can also see, probably easier in your agenda package from earlier, but there are 2 sections with dotted lines showing where the existing carports are. On the right-hand side, this is a closer up view, so you can see the single car garage as well as the accessory building shown there as a fitness room. And again, there'd be associated deck and landscaping that will come at a later date. Next slide. This is the proposed single car garage. The application has shown it as wood shingles. The owners are also considering at this point wood siding to match the rear of the house. In the staff recommendation, we've recommended that the materials come back to staff for final approval. So if the committee is okay with either wood siding or wood shingles, we can leave that as it is in the recommendation to be approved by staff. But as it's shown in the drawings here is wood shingles and a wood garage door and aluminum clad wood windows. Next slide. The same materials are being proposed on the little fitness room accessory building. As you can see here, there are also some sliding doors. Next slide. So again, in terms of the heritage assessment, simple traditional architecture, traditional materials of, like shown here, wood shingles, but possibly wood siding, wood doors. The location, the height, and the massing have quite a minimal impact on the house and the streetscape. Again, they're located to the back of the property and not really easily seen from the street or from the heritage district. Next slide. The staff recommendation is therefore to approve the construction of the 2 new accessory buildings, subject to the following: that final details on paint colors, windows, doors, trim, and cladding be submitted to heritage planning staff for final approval. And I know we have the agent here as well if you have any specific questions, but I'd be happy to answer questions as well.
Super, thanks, Carolyn. So I guess the usual sort of leaving the final details, what you're saying to us is that we're happy that you would make the call between siding and shingles, then we'll just leave the recommendation as is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the committee is okay with that, otherwise the committee can make a motion to be more specific in the recommendation in terms of cladding. But if either is acceptable, then we can leave the recommendation as is. And just to note, the existing house has both wood shingles and wood siding.
Okay, good. And you know, when I saw this before, when it was before us, I thought it was so smart when they did, whoever it was that did it, the original subdivision here, the severance of the lot, to leave that driveway access to the backyard was a really smart move. It significantly improves the accessibility to the back of the property. Okay, so there's the presentation from Carolyn. Are there any questions of Carolyn at this point? Councillor Gittings?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Carolyn, in terms of the wood siding or shingles, just looking for a little further information. Perhaps we could hear from Jerry or some of the others that may be better at this than I am. No preference at all? Is it that they're both appropriate in a case like this? I'm just curious.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Yes, in this case, we have no concerns with either because the district does permit wood siding, wood cladding, wood shingles. And again, the existing house does have a mix of both. So I think the idea would be to match. I think, as I understand it, they originally were looking at wood shingles and they might be changing their mind to wood cladding. So I just want to make sure there's an opportunity through this approval to have either. If the committee supports that, and perhaps the agent has a bit more background information on that as well. But from a heritage perspective, from staff's perspective, we're fine with either material.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any other questions of Carolyn? Okay, now I know that Emily is around somewhere. I can see a little logo. Emily, did you want to speak to the committee about your client's application? Yes, you do. I see a hand. So if you can detect people, that's right. You've got to unmute. There you go. I can see you, Emily. Great. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for the presentation. Yes, our clients had wanted to have the wood horizontal siding, and mainly because the wing, the back wing there is wood siding, and so the connection to the back, I think, would be a lot more immediate. So if we could apply for that one, that would be great. The other one too is that, as you can see in the site plan, we do show some of the trees being removed, but the intention there is to have all trees to remain. There is just the one tree, a very small one, I believe it's a pear tree, that needs to come out because of the construction. But generally, the landscaping as is will remain. The planting, just the new addition of the two structures, plus the with some hardscape. Thank you. Is there any other question?
Okay, thanks, Emily. Jerry?
Hi, thank you, Emily. That was great. But I just wanted to concur with Carolyn on the wood siding versus the shingles. But Emily, I just wanted to ask. I noticed that the house has some certain interesting details on the way the soffit is finished on the corner ends. And is it your intention to echo part of the existing house in the new buildings? For detail, I know that the sketches we have aren't completely finished, but I noticed that their profiling is a little on the thin side. There's not a lot of overhang on the soffit compared to the original house. I think the original house has about just around a foot overhang of the soffits, and the new garage seems to be pretty flat in terms of overhang.
Emily?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. The answer to that is that we'd like to maintain the design of the heritage, just borrowing on some of the elements of the existing house, but that we wanted to just to maintain a separate separateness of from the main house by presenting it with a little bit more of a modern styling. And so that is the reason why we have very simple, simple trim work and overhang.
Okay, so it is an intentional departure from the heritage home?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Jerry. Any other questions of Emily? No? Okay, thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
So you can mute now. You can mute now, Emily. There you go. Good. Okay, so we've heard the discussion and you've seen the presentation. It's now confined to the board. Is there any discussion on the application? Okay, would somebody like to give me a motion? George, thank you. And the motion would be, as circulated, that we approve with the final details of paint colors, windows, door trim and cladding that would be dealt with by staff. So that is the motion, which is also the recommendation in your package. If any further discussion or comment, all those opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried and the application is approved, subject to approval by Planning and Development Council. Okay, thanks, Emily. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to the next item. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one, but it seems that the way the agenda is being printed now, it doesn't allow for a page break between items. So I'm finding that I'm thinking an item's finished and I sort of throw the page away and I find on the back of the page is in fact the beginning of the next item. I don't know if anybody else is finding that awkward, but I certainly am. So I'm not quite sure where I am right now. I think I'm at 4.2, which is a heritage permit application for 55 2nd Street. I think that's also Carolyn. So if you go, Carolyn,
as well. Just get the presentation up. Here we go. So 55 2nd Street. This is located in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District. And I'll just go to the next slide here to show where it is. Located on the east side of 2nd Street. It was formerly part of the Raymar estate, which was to the east and on this block. So it is a modern infill. The house was built in the 1980s. So it is considered to be a non-contributing property within the Heritage District. Next, please. And again, 1980s house non-contributing. The proposal is to remove the existing non-historic gazebo in the rear yard and to construct a new detached cabana. Next slide. Here's the house again from the front. So as you can see, very difficult to see the back. The cabana won't really be visible from the street, and it also won't be readily visible from neighboring properties just due to the amount of trees and foliage in the backyards here. And of course, it backs onto the Raymar, which is not part of the Heritage Conservation District. Next slide. Here's the existing gazebo to be removed and the location of the new cabana. Next slide. Again, just marking the location of the new cabana. Next. And here's a rendering of the new cabana in the rear yard. No significant trees proposed to be removed. It's on just mostly an existing grass area. Next slide. So showing a site plan and a close-up site plan of the property, and you can see the cabana is proposed to have small sort of areas in the north, two small rooms with storage and equipment, and they're proposing a spa pool within the structure underneath. Next slide. Showing the structure from the side, it looks like brick here, but the owners are actually proposing a stone material and wood columns and a simple hip roof. There's also a stone fireplace proposed on the one side as well. Next. So again, in terms of its impact on the Heritage District, this Heritage District plan, which is one of our newest ones, doesn't have a lot of specific guidelines on new accessory structures within non-contributing properties rather. The idea is to create and allow a lot of flexibility for property owners for what they're doing in their backyards. But in terms of this one, they are proposing traditional design materials, stone materials, wood. The structure really isn't easily visible from the street or the district, and no variances are required for the proposal either. Next slide. So the staff recommendation is to approve the new cabana structure, subject to the final details in the stone material being submitted to Heritage Planning staff for final approval. And in this case, we're not going to be as specific as you've seen in the past on some newer properties or additions to heritage properties where we want to see the traditional lake stone replicated or reused as much as possible. Obviously, we want to see a natural stone material that is in keeping with the Heritage District, but there are no requirements to be reusing, lake stone material or anything like that, just because, again, it's a new structure at the back of a non-contributing property. I'm happy to answer questions, and I believe one of the applicants is here as well today.
Okay, good. Thanks, Carolyn. If I could just make a quick comment. It says there that final details on the stone materials. Could we insert the word natural in there? Natural stone materials, because the word stone could include anything, and I don't think any of us here would like to see something other than natural stone. I understand the lake stone issue that you've raised, but natural stone I think would be my preference. But maybe we can leave that to when we actually get to the point of getting a motion on the table. But would that make sense to you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that sounds like something that makes sense, would be appropriate for the property, yes. Okay, any questions of Carolyn? Okay, seeing none, we have somebody representing the property owner, or somebody representing. Are they wishing to speak? Is that Michael? Yes, Michael, I can see your hand. So if you can unmute yourself and perhaps become visible if you wish, but you don't have to, as long as we can hear you.
Oh, hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my name is Michael Persuti. I'm a landscape architect and principal with MEP Design. We were retained by the owners to design the new cabana structure at the back. And really the purpose of it is to extend the use of the property for her personal use throughout the shoulder season. So we're trying to create more of a 3-season cabana structure. The 3 primary design factors that we used, or principles, as Caroline already touched on, was we made sure to respect all the tree protection zones. So none of the construction will be occurring within that. Also to comply with the zoning, so no minor variances are required. And also, even though it's not subject to more stringent heritage requirements, we still wanted to respect the architectural character of the existing house. So the detailing of the columns and the cornices of the front of the cabana take direct cues from the front porch of the house. It's just a small little detail that I wanted to kind of shed light on. And that's really it. Thanks for reviewing the application today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Does anyone have any questions of Michael? Nope. I see Adam and Jelka have appeared. I'm not quite sure why.
Mr. Chairman, that's for the next item.
Yes, I know. I'm just saying they've appeared on the screen, so I wasn't quite sure why.
Right, I'm not able
anyway,
to move them back to
okay,
change their status, so I just have to leave them for now.
Right, that's good. Okay, so we've reviewed the application. We've had the presentations from Carolyn and from the designer. We're now confined to the board. Any discussion? If somebody were to give me a motion, would it include the word natural in the recommendation so that it would be natural stone? It would, Jerry, and you would give me that motion. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment, actually, not necessarily a motion, but if you'd like a motion, I can do that as well. I just wanted to comment that although this appears like a nice, quaint structure on plan, it's actually quite grand. It's 22 feet by 55.5 feet. So given that, and just to concur with the landscape architect's comments, Michael Prasuti, that it's nicely designed and it's proportionally designed so that it doesn't appear to be overwhelming or overly grand. So they've done a nice job. I just wanted to comment on that it's been nicely proportioned as a large structure.
Good. That's good feedback, Jerry. Thank you. And your motion is that it's the one that was in your package. We've added the word natural in front of the stone. If there are no further questions, is anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Right. So we're on to 4.3, which is 180 William Street. Is that Carolyn again?
Yes, that's me as well. So we'll get the presentation up.
Off you go, Carolyn.
Right, so this property is at 180 William Street. Some of you might be familiar with it. The house was constructed several years ago and went through the heritage permit process. Next slide. It's located within the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District on the south side of William Street. Next. And the property contains a 2015 two-story house and attached garage, and the proposal is to construct a new cabana and do some rear landscaping in the rear yard. Next slide. Again, showing the house from the street. This is a similar situation where what they're proposing will not really be readily visible from the street. Next slide. Just another view of the house. Next. Here are some images of where the cabana is to be located at the back of the property. In the top right photo, you can see a couple of trees. That's where the new structure would be located. And these trees would be relocated to another portion of the property. These photos also show you materials that are also proposed to be used in additional landscaping. So the stone that you can see on the ground. But we do have a recommendation for those details to come to staff just for final approval as well. Next slide. Here's a site plan on the left-hand side showing in orange the new proposed cabana, and on the right-hand side, the floor plan and roof plan. Again, quite a simple structure, significantly smaller than the last one we just looked at. This one will also be enclosed as opposed to open. It will have a bathroom and storage located in the interior. Next slide. The proposal is to do wood siding, aluminum clad wood doors and windows in the same colors and designs as are on the house. So it would be matching the house in terms of the materials and style. Next slide. So again, simple, traditional design, not easily visible from the street or district. Materials and colors complement the existing house and are also what would be supported within the Heritage Conservation District in general. And no minor variances are required on this one either. Next slide. So we have the staff recommendation recommending approval of the construction of the new cabana structure and landscaping. And again, subject to the following, that final details on the paving stone material be submitted to Heritage Planning staff for final approval. And just to note, again, the idea is to continue the same existing materials, but we can still leave that through staff to be approved if the committee supports that. And I believe we also have the owners here to answer any questions, but I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Hey, super, Carolyn. Good. So, any questions of Carolyn? Okay, I don't see any. Now, does anyone wish to speak on behalf of the application from the applicants? Is it Adam or Jelka? Yeah, okay, so unmute yourself, Adam.
Yeah, sorry, I just, myself and my wife Violet, I just wanted to say thank you. We walk this area every day. We've lived in Oakville for 20 years and certainly appreciate all the historic houses and want to obviously with this we wanted to stay within that realm, and just wanted to say thank you to you guys for allowing us this opportunity today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? No, thank you, Adam. You can. Oh, Jerry, did you have one? Jerry has a question, so hang about, Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a question and a comment all in one. And I wanted to ask Adam and Velka, I noted that we note that the slope of the cabana is quite a bit shallower than the existing house. And I don't know if you've been present to the first and second presentation of the cabana, but the second cabana used detailing of the existing house, porch detail on the cabana, which made it integrate nicely aesthetically into the home and grounds. And I wondered whether you had considered, I know you have some height restrictions here, to potentially increase the slope of the roof so that it echoes a little bit more closely your existing house, because you have some lovely features on the front facade, those lovely dormers that have a steeper slope and your existing garage. So the question is, would you consider increasing the slope just to echo a little bit of the existing house, which is quite lovely?
Okay, I was just going to say, if that is a concern, we would certainly want to match it with the house. We're not fussed. We just want it to be consistent. So if you said, hey, we needed to increase that slope, you tell us and we'll do it exactly the way you want it.
Yes, I think what Jerry's saying is that, in fact, it echoes more, but it's also a bit more practical. The steeper the slope down there, the better the snow handling.
Yes.
But you don't want to have to go and get a committee of adjustment variance on it. But if you do have some headroom on the height for the ridge, then that I think would be well worth looking into, and probably quite an easy modification to make.
Happy to facilitate that.
Okay, super. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you.
So we're now confined to the board. Any other discussion on this? And Carolyn's been listening to that little bit of comment, and I'm sure she'll take that into account in the final approval stage and help to facilitate that. So we've got a motion. We've got that from Jerry, I think. So Jerry, you've made the motion. Is there any further discussion? Anyone opposed to the motion? Right, the motion is carried. So thank you very much. So we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is not a cabana. And this is item 4.4, which is a notice of intention to demolish at 164 Douglas. And where is he? Am I seeing him?
Right here.
Seeing you, David? Good.
Yep.
You're
Can
on.
you hear me okay?
We can hear you okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is for the property at 164. Actually, I'll just wait for the presentation to come up first. But it's for the property at 164 Douglas Avenue. And as the chair has mentioned, it is for a notice of intention to demolish application. That's great. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the west side of Douglas Avenue, 2 lots south of Sumner Avenue. And it's located outside of the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District, which is located to the east. Next slide, please. So a little background on the property and the application. The property was listed on the Heritage Register in 2009 for its circa 1920s four square style house with arts and crafts influences. So it is only listed and it's not designated. The owner has now submitted a notice of intention to demolish for the property to remove the property from the register. However, it should be noted that the owner is actually seeking to retain the first story brick sections of the north, the east, the front wall, and the northernmost portion of the rear wall, the west wall, while reconstructing the remaining house on the existing foundation and while retaining the existing front yard setback. However, staff, because a substantial amount of the home's material will be removed, staff have determined that a notice of intent to demolish application is required, since the reconstructed home will essentially be a new home. Council must deal with a notice by October 29th. And finally, the applicant has submitted a heritage impact assessment by Archaeological Research Associates in support of the application. Next slide, please. So just a little summary of some of the information contained in the HIA. It notes the house was constructed between 1916 and 1924. It is an asymmetrical 2.5-story structure with a hip roof, a wood frame with brick masonry over the main floor, and wood shingle siding over the second story. The house is also readable as being constructed in the Edwardian style and with some craftsman features, including the shingle siding on the second floor. There are a few prominent additions that are evident on the front facade. So there's a 2-story porch projection over the front that was added, I believe, in the late 80s. And there's a 2-story garage and living space addition on the south elevation that was built, I believe, in the mid 70s. Next slide, please. So in terms of when we receive an application to demolish for a listed property, we need to determine if the property has any cultural heritage value according to the criteria outlined in Ontario Regulation 906. So through the report, the HIA report provided with the application, it supplied an evaluation of the property according to the Ontario Regulation 906. And essentially, the evaluation of the property determined that the home does not contain sufficient heritage value to be considered a significant built heritage resource, and therefore does not merit designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. So in terms of its design or physical value, it notes while the home is readable to be constructed in the Edwardian style, it is not considered to be a significant representation of the style, nor is it considered to be rare or unique. Additionally, the house does not have a high degree of technical or scientific achievement. In terms of its historical or associative value, the home is not associated with any significant community member and does not have the potential to yield information that contributes to the understanding of the community. And finally, contextually, the property has not been found to be significant in defining, maintaining, or supporting the character of the area. And finally, it's not a landmark. Next slide, please. So here are some photos of the area's context. So this is looking to the northwest with the subject property circled. Next slide, please. And now looking to the southwest. Next slide, please. Facing straight on. Next slide, please. And just a closer up a picture of the home. So you can see the garage addition to the left and the prominent porch addition to the right, on the right-hand side of the entrance there. Next slide, please. Just a photo of the garage addition and the south elevation wall. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the west elevation, the rear, obviously, and you can see the garage addition on the right-hand side and the original home on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. This is just one more photo. So you can see the northernmost portion of the west wall on the left-hand side of the house there, which they're looking to retain that portion of the brick. And next slide, please. Just a few photos here of the north elevation of the home. And you can see the box bay window on covered by shingles and a replacement window there on the right-hand side photo. And next slide, please. Just a few more photos of the north elevation. Next slide, please. So while this, the applicant has provided renderings of the proposed reconstructed house, as you can see here. And while what is on consideration today is basically the question of whether the house can be removed from the register or not, based on the assessment of the cultural heritage value of the home. This rendering is provided for the committee's information only to get a good idea of basically what the intended reconstruction will look like. So this isn't not a part of the application. So there's no heritage approvals required for the owner to rebuild on the property, given that it's not a Part 4 designated property or Part 5 designated property. Next slide, please. And just one rendering supplied by the applicant again of the rear of the home. So that's the new addition on the back. And you can see that they retain the brick style of home over the front and the sides of the house. And next slide, please. So in conclusion, the building at 164 Douglas Avenue is not considered to have significant cultural heritage value and does not merit designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. And finally, staff do recommend, however, that the owner allow for the salvaging of architectural elements of the building where there is interest. And this would include the sun belly busters and the balusters on the front porch and the old wood windows. And next slide, please. And finally, the recommendation is that the property at 164 Douglas Avenue be removed from the Oakville Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest, and that prior to demolition, the property owner allow for the salvage of historic materials from the home. And I believe the applicant, Stephen, is with us today, and he can definitely answer some questions regarding the proposed rebuild. And I'm happy to take any questions as well. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, David. Yes, it's when we know this, it's on the register, and if somebody says, I want to take it off the register, we either go Part 4 or we say yes. I mean, that's kind of the way the thing is set up. So the first item of consideration is this a house that could be designated under Part 4? And David has given us the professional opinion of staff that this house would not survive the process of designation to Part 4. Now, the demolition part, though, is one of these technical things, because they're not really intending to demolish. As you can see, they're intending to significantly redevelop the property. But in the old days, if you recall, the building department said as long as one wall is standing, the house has not been demolished. And we got caught that way once pretty badly on a house on Rebecca with that. But if normally with a listed house, you can do pretty well anything you like to it without any heritage approval other than knock it down. When you're doing significant change to the property, you're in fact technically demolishing it because you're changing so much of it. So that's where the demolition thing, because I think I had certainly an intake of breath when I went, oh gosh, they want to demolish it. But the issue would still be the same. Is it Part 4 or is it not Part 4? And I think the advice that we're getting is it's not Part 4. The other part of the presentation, which is the other house, is in a sense somewhat comforting, but is not part of the approval process of this item today. Okay, so we had Councillor Gittings wanted to speak to this item, and does anyone else? Just wave a bit if you do want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm a little confused here. If we are issuing a demolition permit, yet they're going to hold on to a large portion of the home and rebuild around it, I feel that we're better off maintaining what we can of the original home and the look. Can the demolition permit specify, is it a permit to demolish the home, or is it a permit to demolish parts of the home, or to maintain parts of the home? I'm a little confused. If I could have clarity from staff on that.
Yeah, so I can help answer that question. So for a listed property, when an applicant is looking to remove the property from the register, they will apply for a notice of intention to demolish the home. So given that a substantial component of the heritage or historic material of the home is being removed for the rebuild, as I mentioned, that it effectively will be a new home. So in terms of what we have to look at is whether or not the home has heritage value or not. So being listed on the register provides us with that 60-day period to review whether or not it has that value. So we were able to review it along with the HIA submitted by the applicants to determine that effectively that the home in its current state does not have sufficient cultural heritage value to protect and therefore control what the applicant does with the home in the future. So given that, we've determined and concluded that the heritage value isn't there for this home, we wouldn't impose any sort of conditions on the demolition for the applicant, as we've determined that it doesn't have sufficient heritage value for further protection.
Thank you, David. Through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate and understand the explanation, but it will enable the proponent to demolish the full home, correct?
If that was the intention of the applicant, they would have to apply for a demo permit through the building department. There would be nothing preventing them from demolishing the home. That's correct.
All right, Mr. Chair, perhaps we could ask a similar question to the proponent after my colleagues have any other questions. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, David. Yeah, it's the situation we're always in. The process to get yourself off the register means that the property can be demolished. I mean, that's the only process that we have to do it. Even if the owner doesn't want to demolish the property, but to get it off the register, they have to apply for that demolition permit. And in this case, they're going to keep a substantial portion, I think, from the sort of the east facade and the north facade. Certainly will be retained, and it's not brick veneer. I mean, that's double brick. So I mean, they're going to keep that, and it's just because it's more than a given percentage of the property is going to be removed, it becomes demolition. And once you get a demolition permit, I understand that's what it means. It's not demolishing a bit of it. You can demolish it all. But the bottom line is, it's not a Part 4 candidate, and that's kind of the process in which we have to operate. Are there any other questions, Jerry?
Mr. Chair, I think if I understand Councillor Giddings' concern and comment, did the applicant actually request a demolition permit? And my understanding is the applicant did not request a demolition permit for this, but that they applied for I guess a renovation. They're applying for renovation, and because of the technical procedural process, that it naturally folds into a demolition permit request, not requested by the applicant, but as an outcome of the amount of work to be done on the house that retains very little of the original portion of the house. So I guess the two questions here would be back to the applicant. Is there a way that you can renovate and adaptively reuse more of the house so that it doesn't require a demolition permit? That would be one way of proceeding. But I guess if David can explain maybe to reassure Councillor Giddings what the process was, that it wasn't the applicant that requested the demolition on this one?
Sure. So there's also two different processes too. So there's the process to apply for a demolition under the Ontario Building Code to the building department. So their requirements, I can't speak to specifically exactly what the requirements are and what defines a demolition, but it's a little bit different from what we're dealing with in heritage. So when we viewed this, we looked at just the substantial components of the house that are being removed, and then it's an effective demolition of any sort of if there was heritage value that would have been removed essentially. So there is the two separate processes. And so I think we're maybe fortunate in a way that the applicant, has indicated that they're looking at retaining the house in general in the same foundation while we can reconstructing it. But yeah, it is that separate process, and it all comes down again to that we've reviewed it for its heritage value and have found that it just does not meet the Part 4 requirements for designation.
It seems like a bit of a circle that it just depends where you enter it, because if you want to do a renovation like this and you want to take off that whole south side, you're taking off the garage, you're taking off the story above it, and you're taking off little bits at the back as well. That then became a technical demolition. And whether you like it or not, you have to apply for a demolition permit in order to get your building permit to carry out your renovation. And then, but whatever it happens, the question comes back to us, is it Part 4 or not? Because our issue here is staying on the register. And the only way to keep it in the register is to go Part 4. Once it's off the register, it's like any other house in Oakville. Are there any other questions? We can perhaps get back into this when we're talking with Stephen later. Any other questions of David? Okay, Stephen, did you want to make a comment or throw it open for questions? So if you unmute yourself, off you go.
Hi, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephen, and yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions you may have. Yeah, the presentation was done really well by David, and we did go for committee of adjustment for a couple small items, just to retain the location of the garage on the south side and some areas for residential as well as lot coverage. But yeah, we've tried really hard to try and keep the original house. The owner and I both really enjoy the architectural style of the home. And it just so happens that, yeah, once you start to rebuild that garage, even though it's in the same space, you start to just clean up some of the brick and tie it into the addition. This ends up being the result. And so, yeah, we love the house. And this was just the best way that we could, this was the way that we found that we could just kind of keep as much as we could while just updating the house. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, questions for Stephen. Dave, did you want to speak, or Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen, it's a lovely rendition of the house. I have a question to ask and a comment.
Sure. Thank you.
One of the questions is, in your historical research on the house, did you find that the mansardy details, the aesthetic, was a later addition, that it wasn't part of the original house?
Well, one of the original investigations was to see if there was actually double brick all the way to the underside of the roof, because there's lots of homes in Oakville that have that, right? And that's kind of what we expected to see. So the original concept was to remove the mansard, remove the cedar shingles, expose the brick and kind of keep it, only to find out later on that indeed the double brick only goes to the second floor, which leads me to believe that cedar shingles were more original to the home, with the floor system, the way that it cantilevers over the double brick. So whether it was cedar shingle or whether it was something else, that's kind of what was going on. So yeah, that's why, the idea now is to just kind of replace it with some nice wood siding, just to kind of mirror and echo some of the details along the street and in the community. Just go with similar colors, just kind of repair the brick and tie that into the garage. and just kind of wrap it around, kind of create a nice datum. And yeah, just kind of try and restore it as much as we could and modernize it. That garage is built fairly poorly, so that was a big issue with, you know, how we're going to tackle that. But yeah, well, you just carry the same detail all the way around and create a continuity within the concept, and away we go.
Well, it's very nicely done. The proportions are beautiful. I'm looking at all 4 elevations. The only comment I would make on that, Stephen, is the east elevation, the front garage. You have a plane that integrates the garage with the remainder of the house. And from a personal opinion, I feel that if you step the garage portion back, maybe a few inches to a foot, it would allow the actual house portion to come down, the second story to come down and read a little stronger on the street rather than make the garage prominent. And that's just a comment and a free opinion that I give on this today. But
sure.
Lovely proportion. Thank
you. Actually, that was considered. The problem is with the addition and the way that the back of the house worked out, we've got 20 feet for the garage, and that's exactly where it ended up, just right in the same spot. So yeah, I did consider kind of giving a little bit of relief in a shadow line there. But
yeah, at least if you can give a shadow line, I think it would strengthen the verticality of the main house and give it a little bit more prominence against the garage. Again, a personal comment.
Thank you.
And Jerry's comments on that subject are always good to listen to, Steve. I'm sure you'll hear what she says.
Absolutely.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, see now. Thanks, Steve. You can mute now.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now confined to the board. Any further discussion? Basically, what's in front of us is this part 4, is it not part 4? I mean, that's really what we've got to deal with, because all the rest is, for me, it's comforting to know that it's not a demolition. We're not going to lose the property. And indeed, if it does proceed as indicated to us, I think it will be a significant improvement on the street. That's a personal comment too. I shouldn't do that. Anyway, is there any further discussion on this item? So the motion is that it be approved and that the applicant make available any salvage that there is. Is anyone opposed to that? George, did you want to comment? Go ahead, George.
Just I'd be prepared to move the motion, that's all.
Okay, super. Thank you, George. So the motion is as circulated in your package. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. The applicant will be recommending that to council to deal with at their next planning and development meeting. So thank you very much. So if I can find where I am on the agenda, we're into 4.5, which is a notice of intention to demolish 4022 4th line. And is that Carolyn again, or is that Sue?
No, this is
it's Sue and Dave. I think you're the two guys that went into the property, aren't you?
Yeah, I think it's just me. I'm the demolition guy today. So
you're the front guy. Good, Dave. Off you go.
Yeah, so I think we can pull up the presentation for 4022 4th line. I believe this is a property that you're aware of. It did come to the committee last year. Here it is. So again, this is another listed property, so it's not designated. Next slide, please. It is located on the northwest corner of 4th Line and Burnhamthorpe Road West. And so the area of the house, which is the subject of this application, is denoted by the star on the map there. So currently, the residence is the only remaining structure on the property with any potential cultural heritage interest. Next slide, please. So a little background on the property. It was listed on the Heritage Register in 2009 for its potential heritage value as a historic farmstead. And you may remember in 2020, the former timber barn on the property was permitted to be demolished, and the property was also removed from the further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy at that time. But the property did remain on the register still at that time because the house was still there. And at the time, staff did not have an opportunity to completely assess the heritage value of the residence, simply because staff were not granted access to the vicinity of the home. So a full assessment hadn't been completed. So it was basically left on the residence in order to provide staff an opportunity to do the full assessment of the property and to actually visit the site thoroughly. So now the property owner has submitted a notice of intention to demolish application to remove the property from the heritage register in order to demolish the residence due to safety concerns regarding its physical condition. And finally, the application must be dealt with council by October 14th. Next slide, please. So in 2020, a staff research report was completed as part of the application to demolish the timber barn and to remove the property from the cultural heritage landscape strategy. So essentially, the evaluation in the report has shown that the property does have some limited heritage value, but it is not considered significant. But the report also noted that the residence that was built between 1864 and 1877 may have some limited design or physical value as an early vernacular farmhouse, but still a more thorough examination of the residence would be required when staff were granted access to the property. So now heritage staff had been granted access to the property this past August. Both Sue and I visited the interior and exterior of the property and to complete the assessment of the residence. And lastly, as conditions on the property haven't changed beyond the removal of the old timber barn, the research in the report has been utilized as a basis for the recommendation for this current application, as supplemented by the additional information that was garnered by the site visit. Next slide, please. So again, when we look at these applications to demolish listed properties, we have to look at its heritage value according to the criteria in Ontario Regulation 906. So the evaluation of the property according to this regulation found that while the residence is an early example of a 19th century vernacular farmhouse, it is not a significant representation or a strong example of a vernacular farmhouse built in a similar period. And given that the residence has lost much of its historic material, so it would have had a porch, the siding is new, majority of the windows are replacements, and any sort of trim around the cornice or around the windows, if it was there, it's been removed as well. Given its lack of distinguishable architectural features beyond its basic form, it does not clearly portray or read as a particular architectural style or serve as a representative example of a farmhouse design common to Oakville. So essentially it has very limited design or physical value. But the property does have some value in its association with the theme of 19th century agricultural development and through its history as a farmstead in the area. However, the property is not considered to support, maintain, define the character of the area, and is also not a landmark. So overall, the property does have some general cultural heritage value, but it's primarily in its historical and contextual associations to the Glenorchy area and Trafalgar Township, but is not considered significant enough to merit designation under the Heritage Act. Next slide, please. So moving on to some photos. So just the front, you can see the sort of the Gothic revival style gable over the roof. Difficult to see a lot of the features of the home. It's got replacement doors. And next slide, please. Just a few more photos of the front of the house. Next slide, please. A photo of the north elevation. Next slide, please. A photo of the south elevation. Next slide, please. So this is also the south elevation, but the rear wing of the property. Next slide, please. And a photo of the exterior of the property. Or sorry, the rear elevation of the exterior. Now moving to the interior, and the next slide, please. So now this is the interior clearly, and on the left-hand side, you can see some of the lath and plaster walls underneath the sort of the chipping away of the plaster. On the right-hand side is a wood stove that it's not original to the house. This was added by the house's tenants in the last 10 years or so. Next slide, please. Okay, on the left-hand side is a view towards the kitchen. So just a photo of the trimmer on the doorway. On the right-hand side, picture shows some trim around the doorway and the ceiling. Next slide, please. A view from the front hall looking towards the main bedroom on the front hall, as on the left-hand side. The right-hand side, just a photo of the cove ceiling in the master bedroom. And sorry, but the photo quality is quite dark in there, so I couldn't really get a better resolution. Next slide, please. A photo of the trimmer on the doorway and the hallway to the rear of the home. And on the right-hand side is a photo of the upstairs. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in conclusion, the residence at 4022 Fourth Line is not considered to have significant cultural heritage value and does not merit designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. Given the advanced state of deterioration of the residence, together with its limited cultural heritage value, its conservation or adaptive reuse as part of any future development is not considered a viable option. And finally, given that there is associative and contextual history or heritage value to the property, commemoration of the property and the Glenorchy area within any future development is being recommended and to be implemented by entering into a heritage easement agreement with a property owner that would be registered on title of the property. And next slide, please. And finally, the staff recommendation is that the property at 4022 Fourth Line be removed from the Heritage Register. Secondly, that staff be authorized to negotiate and finalize the terms of a heritage easement agreement with a property owner to ensure that the history of the area is commemorated within any future development of the site. And that's to the satisfaction of heritage planning staff and the Director of Planning Services and the town solicitor. And thirdly, that the town solicitor be authorized to discharge the heritage easement agreement from title at the expense of the owner once the requirements in the agreement have been satisfied to the satisfaction of the manager of policy planning and heritage. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Super, thank you, David. The interior of the place looks like a bit like an Airbnb nightmare. When you arrive and discover it's not quite how it looked in the photographs. Okay, Kathy, you wanted to speak to this.
Thank you. I'm pleased to give you a motion to approve the staff recommendation. I visited the site, and to say it's been left to the elements is an understatement, but I do appreciate the thorough report that's been provided. And the fact that even though it isn't visible per se from the public realm, we're still going to have some sort of recognition for the contribution to the area. So pleased to move it.
Fine, thanks, Kathy. We'll deal with that in a second. It's interesting for me when I read the stuff and I see Glen O-R-C-H-Y, and then I also see Glen O-R-K-Y. See, because the English can't say ha. They say K, so it's not Loch Lomond, it's Loch Lomond. So it's not Glenorchy, it never was, it's Glenorchy. But if you can't get the H in there, I guess Glenorchy would do. And I guess this heritage easement process that we're doing here is to try and make sure that whatever happens here, there is still some memorial to that development and to the history associated with it. And that's an achievement, I think, when we can get that from an applicant. Are there any other comments or discussions on this item, Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to agree with both you and Councillor Dudek. This is an unfortunate and sad evolution to demolition, but I think staff has done a lovely job in trying to incorporate, some historical elements within the future agreement. And what a lovely legacy it would be to the community and to Heritage Oakville if they were able to incorporate into, say, for example, a landscaping design, either foundation footings plan that would be part of a landscape experience at the outset of any new development, and perhaps even take, as a positive, a branding of some of the history that is related to Glenorchy or some of the other historical and heritage attributes of the site. So nicely done. I think, I concur with both you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Duddick in the good research that staff has done and trying to incorporate as much as possible into the next chapter of this property.
Thanks, Jerry. And yes, the heritage side is right in at the beginning. I mean, it's easier to incorporate ideas from the initial planning than it is to try and shove them in halfway through or at the end. So hopefully we'll get the outcomes that we're all looking for here. So we have a motion from Councillor Duddick to accept the staff recommendation as contained in the package circulated to you. Is there any further discussion on that? Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, David. And we're now into item 4.6, which is the conservation plan for 1042 6 Line. And I'm pretty sure this one is Sue. So Sue, if you could lead us through this one, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If the presentation could just be loaded for this, I'd appreciate it. Wonderful, thank you. So we're looking at a property that the committee should be fairly familiar with, as we've seen it a few times over the past few years. This is 1042 6 Line. The residence itself is not particularly visible from the road from 6 Line, as there is this wonderful laneway of Norway spruce trees that leads from 6 Line up to the residence. The property has been recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape. Next slide, please. And so here you can see the full extent of the property, that laneway coming in from 6 Line to the residence, and kind of maintained areas at the top of the hill, and then a large wooded area that runs down to the creek system. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, you've seen this before. First, there was a notice of intention to designate issued in October of 2018. That designation was appealed to the Conservation Review Board. However, the town and the property owner reached a settlement, and as a result, the property owner withdrew their objection in March of 2020. And then in May of 2020, in accordance with the minutes of settlement, the town was able to pass the Heritage Designation Bylaw under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act to fully designate the significant cultural heritage landscape of this property. Next slide, please. And so, as we all know, when we designate a property as a significant cultural heritage landscape under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, we require a conservation plan. And this was certainly made aware to the property owners before the designation bylaw was even passed. And in the summer of 2020, after the bylaw was passed, the owner agreed to prepare the conservation plan using their own consultants. Heritage planning staff, meaning myself, participated in several meetings with the property owner's consultants to move the process along. However, in late 2020, work ceased on the project, and in January of 2021, the property owners indicated that they were no longer going to prepare the conservation plan. And so the town took it upon ourselves to retain Laterno Heritage Consulting to prepare the conservation plan. Those are the consultants who have been retained by the town in the past to do a number of reports on this property. They provided a peer review of the original heritage impact assessment for the previous development application, and as well they did a heritage impact assessment that led us to the drafting of the statement of cultural heritage value and heritage attributes for the property. So they're very familiar with it. So they were retained by the town then to prepare the conservation plan from scratch. The property owners have been provided with this draft conservation plan for review, and we've let them know that we were happy to receive their feedback, meet with them to discuss it. But to date, they have provided no comments on the draft conservation plan that you see here today. Next slide, please. So the conservation plan itself is fairly similar in format to a number of the other conservation plans that you've seen before you for cultural heritage landscapes. It has divided up the property into a few different conservation areas that simply make it easier to manage the guidelines when we're trying to manage change to the property. The first is the entryway, and that includes that driveway that is lined by Norway spruce trees. The second is the residence, which includes that large 2.5-story arts and crafts inspired residence. The third is the arboretum, which is the specifically planted trees in many different varieties, which I'll talk about in just a second, that was planted as part of this landscape. And then 4 is the valley lands, which are the natural lands that run down into the creek system. Next slide, please. The conservation plan, as usual, has the categories provided for the property owner and town staff, Heritage Oakville and Council to use when we're looking at how to manage proposed changes to the property. Category A, actions are exempt from a heritage permit requirement because they do not impact the heritage attributes of the property. Category B actions are those minor actions that go to staff for approval. And Category C actions require Heritage Oakville review and council approval. There's also a condition assessment provided in the conservation plan that is up to date as of 2021. And the guidelines and the checklist that we use in order to assess the impact of proposed changes on the cultural heritage value and heritage attributes of the property. The one thing that I did want to highlight in this conservation plan that's slightly different is that because the trees play such a significant part of this cultural heritage landscape, we felt it was important to delineate which types of trees were the significant trees that have a slightly different management system under category A, B, and C, and then type 2 trees, which are the trees that are not of significant importance individually, but kind of collectively, make up the valley system, et cetera. And so the reason why we have these 2 different types of trees is one, so that we can recognize that some trees are very significant. And it also helps us to address concerns of either development on the property or even adjacent to the property, because some of the trees on this property do have branches that kind of overhang onto adjacent properties, even though the tree trunk is on the designated property itself. Next slide, please. And so this is just a map to show you the trees that have been identified as type 1 trees. These are the significant trees that have individual value and are defined as heritage attributes in the designation bylaw. So we have the Norway spruce trees that line the entranceway and kind of open into a Y shape leading to the residence. And then we have a number of different specimen trees that surround the residence and take up the arboretum lands, from the ginkgo tree to various types of oak trees, birch, magnolia, fir, etc. Next slide, please. And so just a final note on this, because the property has been subject to a development application, and that's why it actually came forward to the committee in 2018 for a notice of intention to designate, because the property was threatened by that development application. The application it was for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment was turned down by council in 2018, and the property owners did appeal that to the LPAT. And there was a decision made in 2018 that recognized that there could be some development on this parcel and the adjacent properties that made up the entire development site, but that revisions were required, which could be resubmitted. And so the property owner, in the meantime, went away and revised their application, which was submitted and denied approval by town council. And so the application went back to the LPAT in March of 2021. I was one of 3 staff members who gave expert witness evidence to the tribunal in support of the town. And it's speaking especially to the need for a conservation plan for this cultural heritage landscape. And in August of 2021, the tribunal released its decision, which denied the appeal of the development application, meaning that the development will not go ahead. And so why I think it's important to mention here is that it is possible that another development application could be made for this property and for adjacent properties. But having the conservation plan in place will provide us with guidance that would assist in processing any future applications for alteration or demolition on this property that might be part of a future development application. And there isn't any before us yet, and that's why it's wonderful if we can get the conservation plan now in place before we have to deal with any new applications. Next slide, please. And so the recommendation before you today is that you endorse the draft Cultural Heritage Landscape Conservation Plan, or if there are any feedback on minor issues in the plan that staff can amend before it goes forward to Planning and Development Committee, we're happy to take that those notes, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sue. Great report as usual. And I should say that congratulations to you and to the other members of Team Oakville to beat back OMB, LPAT, OLT, whatever it's called now, on a development application. I don't recall ever hearing another one like that, apart from Glen Abbey. Anyway, so that's good. It's pretty thorough. I mean, I've read it, and I'm not sure what I could do to tell you that you might want to incorporate to make it better. But if anybody has any ideas or other comments, now's the time to let us hear. Does anyone want to chip in on this? Other than to say it's a great piece of work. It's a great piece of work. All we're asked to do today is endorse it. This will be Planning and Development Council that will, in fact, I guess if it approves this plan, then it becomes the plan. Yes. Councillor Gittings. Sorry, Councillor Duddick. I was 2 different places on the screen.
That's quite all right. I'd be pleased to give you a motion to endorse. And as pointed out by you, well done by staff, considerable amount of work, and a real bonus to be able to conserve this property as is.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we have the motion to endorse this, and the Planning and Development Council will do the heavy lifting after that. So is there anyone opposed to Councillor Duddick's motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. So I think we're now on to 5, which is an information item only, and it only requires us to receive it. And this is the listing of delegated heritage permits, the minor changes that have to be approved as projects proceed. So if, as usual, if anyone has any questions about any of the items on this, then they should speak to staff directly, either by phone or by email. Councillor Gittings, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any. I don't have any questions on the specific properties. I do have a question for staff in terms of, it seems to be a longer list than we would normally see when the delegated permits come through. Is that the case, or just curious if we've seen more work occurring in the area?
Helen?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Giddings. I would say yes, there has been an increase this spring and summer. I think a lot of people are wanting to do work on their own properties, especially more minor work, because obviously, it's more difficult to get building permits for larger projects, but a lot of the smaller projects don't require building permits, but still require minor heritage permits. So we have definitely seen a big uptake on that.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to provide you with the required motion.
To receive the item. Super. Thank you, Councillor. So any other comments? The motion's on the floor. Anyone opposed? Seeing nobody opposed, the item is received. Thank you. So we've once again survived another meeting in virtual circumstances. So thank you all again for your participation in this format. And the next meeting is Tuesday, October the 19th. And it'll be a virtual meeting again, I'm pretty sure. I don't see things opening up full scale for some time yet. So if I can have a motion to adjourn, which I've got from Brenda. Thank you, Brenda. So there'll be nobody opposed to that. So the meeting is adjourned, and I thank everybody else, as usual, for the gift of their time today. Thank you very much, everybody. Go forth and have a lot of fun.